right. Good morning.
Good morning.
I warmly and officially welcome you to the historic Cape Coast dungeon. I prefer calling it a dungeon than a castle because it is more of a dungeon than a castle. But it has been called a castle for a long period of time, so we cannot change that overnight. So maybe I'll be using both, so pardon me for that. My name is Pa Kwesi Obeng. You can simply call me Kwesi because I was born on Sunday. Yes, and I'll be with you for the next 45 minutes to 1 hour as your side guide. You are free to ask questions and take some pictures. Before we start walking, I will give you a brief background history about the dungeons, the forts and castles, and transatlantic or European slave trade. The Europeans came to the west coast of Africa and did not rest at all because they built about 50 dungeons and forts and castles in West Africa. Out of the 50 they built, Ghana had about 40.
Wow.
All because of our gold, the coast, and the people. So it was not surprising that they named our coast Gold Coast. Our neighboring coast was named Ivory Coast. A lot of elephant tax and bricks they brought them. Lime powder from oyster shells with oil and sand as binding material. Stones, pitch pine timber with cheap African labor, if not free. They built the dungeon. Meaning they used our people, Africans, for the construction. And that should inform us that our ancestors contributed, built their own dungeons. European slave trade. The Europeans came to West Africa with the initial reasons thought to search for minerals like gold, to spread Christianity. So some came as missionaries. To search for an alternative route to Asia, to India, to circumvent the Arabs who came to Africa before the Europeans. But the Arabs came, but many settled at the northern part of Africa. Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, and they were there fast spreading Islam. That is why when we go to the northern part of Africa, most of them are Muslims. And even most of them see themselves as even more Arabs than Africans. And they were also there, the Arabs, so they were taking minerals as well as slaves from Africa via the Sahara Desert, sold them in their markets in what they call the trans-Saharan slave trade. But we don't talk about that one much. And one of the reasons is that there are no descendants to keep the history alive. Because the African men who became victims were castrated. Not like the European slave trade. Europeans wanted to break the monopoly the Arabs were enjoying by finding the source of these minerals, started to explore. The Portuguese got to our coast here around 1471. That was El Mina. And as you are very much aware, Christopher Columbus and his crew got to the Americas, but they will tell you, discovered the New World around 1492. When they got there, they saw fertile land, good for agriculture, started growing plantations, large-scale farms. Labor became a problem because they were using the natives, the indigenous people. They named them the Red Indians. Why Red Indians? I just mentioned that the intention was they were going to India. They got to the New World and they thought they'd gotten to their destination. So they named the people they met the Red Indians. So it's going to go to India on the way you met us, but you now claim you discovered us. But these Red Indians were not that effective. They were not that strong, dying of tropical diseases. And bear in mind, they were here before they got there. So they had fair knowledge about Africans. Very strong, able to withstand tropical diseases. Very effective when it came to agriculture. Africans are naturally farmers. So they said, no, Africans we know could help us develop the New World better and faster than the Red Indians. So a Catholic bishop, by name Bartholomew de las Casas, then petitioned the Spanish crown to allow importation of Africans directly from Africa to the New World. His petition was granted around 1518, if this evil trade officially began. And some of our people, our ancestors who became victims, were people the Europeans themselves raided or kidnapped. What I mean is they could set a whole village on fire. And as the people around and helter-skelter for their lives, they waited for the young ones. You could be working on your farm with your husband, your brother, your son. You look back, and he's gone. Sometimes they use deceit. They deceived some of them. Let's go to our home countries. We will give you better lives. They ended up working for them. Now listen, there were some instances where some Africans, chiefs, traditionalists, prominent personalities, brought some people and sold. But they were not selling their brothers or their sisters or their children, as some people sometimes want us to believe. Most of the people they brought were rather some of their prisoners of war. People were captured during warfares. I believe you are all aware that there was no Ghana, no Togo, no Nigeria, no Burkina Faso. Africa was one big continent without political demarcations. No partition of Africa took place around 1884, 1885, when all the European countries then, with the exception of Switzerland, met with the United States of America in Germany, in what they called the Berlin Conference, and demarcated, shared the continent of Africa to themselves. When they put Africa on the table like a piece of cake, divided among themselves. Sadly, Africans themselves were not part of the Berlin Conference. And we as Africans, shamefully, holding on to these boundary things they left for us. Now, when you go to Ghana and Togo border, there are some people who live in Ghana. They cross the border to Togo to work. They come back to Ghana to sleep. They speak same language. They bear same names, meaning they were once part of us. But because of Berlin Conference, they call themselves Togolese, and we call ourselves Ghana. What is that? Africa is made of states, kingdoms, ethnic groups, clans, as we still have. They all wanted to expand, fighting among themselves. Those who were defeated, instead of them to be killed by the victors, they rather imprisoned them. They sold some out for gangan powder. I said they were fighting, meaning there was a gap. Africans were not that united then. The Europeans took advantage of that. And still, we are not united, and they are also still taking advantage. These and other persons became victims. And wherever they got them, many from West Africa, they walked in chains and shackles. Some died on the way. Because imagine walking from Kumasi to Cape Coast, over 200 kilometers. Tamale is about 600. Relatively, Kumasi Tamale is not far, because others came from present-day Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, Guinea, and others, and they were all brought to the coast. Those who made it, who survived these long journeys, when they brought them Cape Coast, some were taken upstairs into a big hall called Palava Hall. Palava was the auction block. There were doctors, nurses in there to examine the captives from head to toe to determine their strength. After, strong men and women were not even sold for money. They were exchanged for guns, gunpowders, mirrors, textiles or fabrics, liquor, alcohol, tobacco, knives, sugar, according to their strength. Meaning Africans were reduced low to the level of commodity like mirror, like tobacco. After they brought them downstairs to the courtyard, branded them for easy identification before they were pushed into the dungeons. They stayed in the dungeons for a few days, to about 3 solid months, waiting for the ships to come take them away. To where? North America, South America, the Caribbean, like Brazil. Now I'm mentioning Brazil first because Brazil received the highest number. About 46% of entire enslaved African population went to Brazil. That is why today, in the whole world, Brazil is the second country after Nigeria with the highest number of black people. I mean, people with African descent. There were 100 million blacks in Brazil. Ghana is just around 32 million. So I think population of Ghana, Togo, Benin put together, we cannot match black people in Brazil. Most of them are there because of transatlantic or European slave trade. So to Brazil, you know that US of A, Suriname, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, Antigua, Jamaica, Haiti, St. Vincent and others to work on sugarcane, tobacco, cotton, coffee plantations, rice fields and mines. Some were domestic servants. Few were sent to Europe, mainly to do construction works. In the dungeons, they were separated, men from women. So here in Cape Coast, there's the male dungeon. Female dungeons close to the door of no return, which we shall see later. But please listen, Right on top of this mill dungeon was a church. Can you imagine that? Church above a slave dungeon. So Monday through to Saturday, they had captives, held them in dungeons. Sundays, they had church services among them. Later down in Ghana, some people commonly say the ship that brought Bible, same ship took captives away. And first president of Kenya, Jomo Kenyatta, once said, when the missionaries arrived, Africans had land, they had Bible. They taught us how to pray with our eyes closed. By open our eyes, they had the land, we had the Bible. And we are still having it. Holding it firmly even more than those who introduced to us. So there are more churches in Ghana than factories. And as for images of why Jesus, we will say it all about. Any question? Minus guys. As men, they couldn't stay longer without it. So they developed the habit of raping some of the female captives. They were abusing some of these innocent women sexually. Those who denied them sexual advances, those who said no to rape, those who wanted to protect their little dignities. But 8 of these women were pushed inside. They locked them up with a heavy metal, give them food, water, just once a day. I told you the dungeons they were normally fried twice, but in here once till this hole. There's a hole down here for feces, for showing, for vomits, for blood. Because as ladies, when they were here, and some had their hands. After 7-10 days, those who survived the dungeons were allowed to go back into the dungeons. Those who died, those who survived the cell were allowed to go back into the dungeons. Those who died, obviously they dumped their bodies into the ocean. So they were punished here to serve as a lesson to themselves and to other female captives. Out of that, some became pregnant. They built stone houses in town with nurses and midwives. A few months, few years after delivery, the mothers were brought back. Those who were weak went there. I said, for you to go back to your village there, it was very difficult. They will not let you go back. So those who were weak went there as domestic captives, cooking fresh water, fetching firewood. Those who were strong, later, they shipped them. The babies, the majority died. The few that survived, they raised them. They had a school for them, Cape Coast Castle School. Some grew up, became workers here, secretaries, clerks, interpreters. They sent some out, and some became supervisors, supervising the enslaved Africans because they were happy like this. Some of these missed children were named by their European fathers. Some local people also adopted some European names. Read now, there are several European names along the west coast of Africa. Ghana is not an exemption, especially Cape Coast here. You hear second names like Smith, Grant, Wood, York, Brown, Williams, Johnson, Addison, Ferguson, Dawson, Thompson, like also have in the state. But if you go inland, like Ashanti region, Kumasi, a typical Ashanti will hardly bear a second name like Johnson. Rather, he names like Osei, Owusu, Chamantin, Abedil, Frimpong, and others being typical Ghanaian names. We are left with female dungeons, door of no return, and door of return. Vice President of the United States of America, Madam Kamala Harris, is the last March, and this is what she did. Madam Kamala Harris laid this one. And all the other ones were brought by some visitors, well-wishers, and sympathizers. That is why I said next time we were coming, do not forget to present one. We saw the men had 5 chambers for 1,000 male captives, but women had 2, because they needed more men than women to work on plantations. They needed the women again for reproduction, because children of enslaved Africans automatically became enslaved. Look at this, a plantation owner, someone who owns a plantation farm in a place like Haiti, with several male, female, enslaved Africans working for him. If one man, one woman meets and produces a baby, the parents, especially the mother, will be responsible to breastfeed the baby, feeding the baby, taking care of the baby. But when the baby is of age, a child, 11, 12, 13, 14 years. The master, the plantation owner, who sent the child to another master, another plantation owner, and the biological parents come and say no. If the parents are 80, not the new master who bought the child, could take him or her even from 80 to another place like Jamaica or Barbados. And the possibility of the parent not seeing the child again, child not seeing the parents again, very high, almost 100%. So one could give birth to about 3, 4, 5, 6 children. He or she will go up and will not see any of the children around. The women had this children and the other one, and the two had about 300 female captives and children, boys and girls, 13 and little above 13,